Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Sueur City Council meeting dated July 25, 2022. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You were all presented, council members, with the agenda earlier this week. You've had time to review it, look it over. At this time, I will entertain any motions to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
So move, Mr. Sullivan, with the exception, we have added one item, 7F, which is the carnival permit for Giant Days, with that added.
Yep.
So noted.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Swanberg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the City Council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. At this time, I'll ask our city administrator, Mr. Roby, to review these with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, we have approval of City Council minutes from its regular July 11th, 2022 meeting. Secondly, approving disbursements through July 25th, 2022. Included in those disbursements are some purchases over $25,000, which are called out separately in your packet. And they include purchases from Bolton and Menk for engineering services for $91,749.90. Kesey Incorporated for access control systems, $27,168.60. Magni Construction for well number 8, the 10th payment application in that project for $176,733.92. Minnesota Department of Revenue for June 2022 sales tax, $56,524. Minnesota Public Facilities Authority, the MPFA, for the Henderson portion of the wastewater treatment plant PFA loan, $220,804.20. The Sueur Irby Company, in support of the CASA 36 electric distribution project, $25,686.73. And Wesco for electric underground materials for $27,256.51. Item C, approve the payment application number 10 to Magni Construction, referenced earlier. Item D, approve a bingo permit for the Sueur Rotary for bingo to take place during Giant Days. Item E, approve a dance permit for Giant Days. Item F, approve a parade permit for Giant Days. And item G, approve Main Street closure application for the bar and grill for the weekend of Giant Days.
Thank you, Mr. Roby. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns you want to address myself or Mr. Roby? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'm sorry, was that Mr. Schlueter? Thank you.
Second.
Second, Mr. Swanberg, thank you. All those in, any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. This time, we will now move on to public comment, which provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make comments must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing their name and address. Tonight, we have no one who wishes to address the council, so that will carry us into our regular agenda. At this time, we'll ask our city administrator to give us his update. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it relatively brief tonight. One thing I do want to call attention to that was asked about was the new 988 service for suicide and mental health prevention, or suicide and mental health crisis intervention line, which has been in the news recently. Minnesota Department of Health issued a press release on that with some information. I heard back from the county today to confirm that that's a statewide program, and so the Sueur residents should be able to utilize that service going forward. It's similar to 911 in that any phone can dial 988 and receive services through that line. Truly the rest of the items I want to provide an update on all generally involve items on the regular agenda. The one thing I will mention is we have our finance analyst who council approved at the last meeting. She'll be joining us starting next week. So we're very excited about that. Our audit team from Bergen KDV completing the city's annual financial audit is on site. They were on site today and doing the bulk of their audit work remotely. So we'll continue our work with them in the coming weeks. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. From there, we will move on to the regular agenda if we may. And that takes us into item 7A, talk about the emerald ash borer, the infestation and grant overview. So at this time, I'll let Mr. Roby introduce our staff.
Yes, thank you. Joining us tonight, Rebecca Reinbold and Scott Schrader. Scott is our Public Works Manager, has been with the city since early 2001. And Rebecca has been with us.
21.
What, did I say 2001?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 2021. Yes, 2021. Rebecca has been with us for just about a year now through the AmeriCorps program, doing a lot of urban forestry work within the city limits, and we're appreciative of her work. And tonight's presentation is in some ways a capstone on the work that she's been doing in the city, and a lot of the questions that have come up in the last 2 weeks around emerald ash borer are very timely considering the work that she's been doing here. Rich is also here, Rich Kuchera, Public Services Director, if he needs to chime in on anything. But Scott and Rebecca are going to walk us through a few things. They were originally slated to present tonight to discuss a grant through the state of Minnesota regarding emerald ash borer. I've asked them to kind of extend their presentation into the current and the relatively recent news of the infestation discovered here within the city limits. So they'll be able to address that as well. And with that, I'll hand this off to you guys.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Administrator Roby. Back in February, Public Works identified the opportunity for an EAB grant just to help fund removals of trees that ultimately is going to happen anyway, which obviously has happened. Also in February, City Council approved the City of Sueur's EAB management plan. With that plan, it was needed in order to apply for this grant that we applied for. So back 3 weeks ago, actually, the DNR got with us. We were awarded $38,000, which actually is going towards the contractor fees for the removals, the stump grindings, the planting supplies, some equipment, and the 62 trees that are going to need to be replanted after the 62 are cut out and removed. Also, with the grant, there was a 25% match that needed to take place, which that'll be in-kind labor from the city. It comes to $27,000. But again, it's just labor of staff to plant the trees, maintain the trees over several years. The grant is pretty specific in the sense that you needed to add up the time for 3 years of maintenance, even though there's not generally three years of maintenance to plant a tree. But in the end of it, it actually, we benefit from it in the sense that we can get our 25% match that way. So it's kind of a good deal that they do require that. This slide depicts the area in which we're going to be working for this grant or with this grant. The grant outlines South Forest, or was that? That's North 4th Street, Ferry Street, over to Park Lane and over to Morningside. In that area, it's roughly 75 acres. There's 5.5 miles of right-of-way in there. And in that, there's 100 trees, exactly 100 ash trees within that area. And of the 100, 62 are going to get removed. So that's the area where this grant's getting used for. The DNR, when we applied for the grant, they wanted more specifics in the sense of, so we just kind of circled town and said, yeah, we can find 100 trees, right? But they actually just wanted everything really zoned down to like, here, this is the area you're going to be working in, instead of just kind of willy-nilly, let's go cut down trees. Here's the project timeline for the grant. Fast forward from April into July. So towards the end of August, early September, we'll go and notify the residents to whom have ash trees within their right of way that are going to get removed, and just so they're not, surprised, because I'm certain there's going to be some hemming and hawing about, cutting down 62 trees. Outside of that, though, there's October is when local contractors plan to start the removal process and the stump grinding process. We're hopeful that staff can come right behind and plant the trees. We're very optimistic that we can try to get all 62 planted this fall. I'd love to get them planted this fall. But if not, the project timeline through the DNR is to have it wrapped up by June next year. So it's an aggressive schedule, we figure, but I think it's easily doable, weather pending, obviously. But so one of the bigger deals of the grant is this approved DNR planting list. It wasn't as easy to just go to drummers and say, hey, I'm going to go pick up 62 trees. There's specifics in how the DNR allows you which trees and how many of those trees they'll let you plant per Rebecca's work, in the sense of like the inventory. A lot of these trees that are on here, these 10 native trees to Minnesota, we don't have a whole lot in the city. So for the DNR, it was pretty easy for them to say, yeah, you can plant those. If we would have said we're going to plant maple trees, they would have ejected they weren't even allowed it, because we just have so many maple trees in town. It's silly. But outside of that, I mean, there was a lot of work going into this list for Rebecca to create it. Actually, it wasn't as simple as what, like I said, we're going to pick some trees. There was a lot of science behind actually picking them. With that, so with EAB being found in town 2 weeks ago, Rebecca's going to touch base on a plan that pretty much, like, that map there's like the brainchild of Rebecca. Like, she created all of that work. Actually, it looks like a bunch of little dots, but there was hours and hours and hours of work behind that. So I'll let Rebecca explain that.
So the city has been preparing for an EAB outbreak, and over the past 10 months, I've been conducting a tree inventory of the publicly owned trees and right-of-way areas of trees. And out of the over 2,800 trees I documented, roughly 18% are ash trees, which is the most prominent tree in the urban forest. Next slide. Then after inventorying, I recognized areas of higher density of the ash trees. From there, I split the city into 4 phases, depending on the highest density that I recognized. Each phase has an average of 125 ash trees. And then injection of publicly owned ash trees will depend on future grant funding.
Can I just add something on that real quick?
Yes.
Sorry not to interrupt. So the injections are something that we've discussed as a staff. So there is an injection that can be given to ash trees. It's basically a pesticide that is injected into the tree itself, that is being promoted in some circles as a way to vaccinate the tree for a period of time from being overtaken by the emerald ash borer. They're not inexpensive, as you might imagine. And so it is an option. There's not really solid data on what the longevity of that vaccine is for trees. Yes, Marv's seen the corollaries to the COVID-19 pandemic here. But it is an option. So whether it's not cheap, and so if we are able to receive some funding through the state, that would cover injections versus removal of trees. That's something that certainly the city can plan for. But that's all I wanted to add on that. Sorry, thanks.
Going off of what Joe is saying, actually, so like right now, Rebecca actually said, so when she went out and did this tree inventory, she classified the trees from good to bad to excellent, you know, to score them. And we took out all the excellent trees and set them aside to say, hey, we're going to inject those. It actually came up to be just a little over $60,000 just to inject a tree that ultimately is probably going to get cut down. When we can't say, but I mean, it's a pretty big investment for the city of Sueur to invest in. There are grants out there, which no one's opposed to doing it if there's grant money available, which there is, but you just have to apply for it and hopefully you can get that grant. With that, so I was fortunate enough to come from a municipality prior to this that had EAB, and probably one of the biggest questions that we got was public trees versus private trees. Who's taking care of what's going on, so on and so forth. It's probably going to sound mundane, but obviously public trees are owned public property, parks, green spaces, public facilities, very similar right of ways. Private trees, anything outside the right of way on private property, that's the resident's responsibility. Again, I've never heard of a municipality paying for private trees to get, done. Some will help in the sense to identify a tree, which at the end of the day will help identify a tree. But currently, I'm referring everyone to, Beacon or the county's GIS. Pull up your site, look on a map, see if there's a tree. If it's yours, it's yours. Otherwise, at the end of the day, the city will come out and measure your right of way, see where it's at. If it comes to like a property line between Marvin and I, let's say, we can't decide whose tree is that, but it is what it is. At the end, I mean, we can't force anyone to cut down a tree. So it is recommended for it to be cut down just to mitigate the spread of the disease. So outside of that, I don't know, questions?
I got a question. What is it we look for with an ash tree as far as knowing whether it's diseased or not?
Man, one would think it's pretty simple, but it's really not. So like there's so many different aspects to the tree. A lot of what Rebecca and I will look for is it's called blonding of a tree. Like a side of a tree will just turn just white after a while because it's dying.
Like the bark will start like chipping off from the top.
Woodpecker holes. Again, though, it's not a telltale sign. There's this tree over in Morningside. Rebecca actually coined that whole area EAB zone. But there's not that we've never found anything over there, but because all the trees just look pretty sick over there, but we just haven't found anything there. There are other bugs that get in trees. So EAB starts at the top of the tree and it works its way down. So you'll see it at the top of the leaves or the branches and it'll just start choking out the tree. But it takes, I don't know, 3
years.
3 years for it to actually. So that tree that was found over on Outer, like that thing's pretty smoked. So it's been there a while. So, but I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it at this point besides that tree will just have to get taken down, which she's already contacted a contractor. But
And to be clear, when you're talking about trees that are in the right of way, you're talking like the boulevards,
the
right?
boulevards, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. And we replaced a lot of those trees. Was it 2019 when we did the sidewalk?
Yeah, you did out on 4th Street and whatnot. Yep, you guys replaced.
Some of those will
There's
be.
quite a few, but none were ash trees, obviously.
Oh,
but
okay.
no, well, I don't think anyone would sell you an ash tree right now anyway. So, but the majority of the trees are bigger. So I mean, they're an older tree. I would assume when DED or Dutch elm disease came through, I would assume they were replaced by ash trees and maple trees. So I mean, and there's the downfall of EAB in a sense is just the economic cost of it all, because you figure there's 529. That's a lot of trees to cut down. That's probably well over $750,000 if you were to contract that out. So I mean, the idea of having these phases is to try to break it up. And to Rich's point of some trees, the ones that were in excellent condition, say they don't get injected, but when it's their time to get cut down, it's just their time to get cut down. I mean, it's a simple process in my opinion. I mean, obviously you guys don't work with trees every day, but it's a simple process.
And just to highlight something that Rebecca pointed out earlier, we have roughly 18% of all publicly owned trees are ash trees. And between ash trees and maple trees, it makes up, not quite 50%, almost 50% of our urban tree inventory or urban forest that the city controls. So it's not an insignificant number. And so one of the things, to highlight what the state is recommending is really diversification. So for example, if there were a maple blight at some point, we would be hit very hard by that, just given the sheer number of maple trees and various varieties of maple trees that we have in the community. And so by diversifying our urban forest, we set us up for some longer term success in terms of being able to combat these pandemics.
Very good. Anybody else have any questions?
I just have one question about clarification about the injection of the tree. Is that 60,000 per tree?
No,
No.
the total. So there was,
Okay.
I think there was 130 trees it did.
Mhm.
It's just the bigger the tree, obviously, the more
Injection
juice it
costs,
takes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's
Thank you.
typically $13 or $13 an inch of the DBH. So, and that's average. I mean, there's you can go to Home Depot or Menards and go get it, but I mean, it's like taking children's Tylenol, I guess, for an adult, so I don't know how good it would work,
And there's no guarantee, there's no warranty on it.
No.
They're just starting
it's a
to,
crapshoot.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, it certainly is an option for those who decide to do it. And, we wouldn't discourage it for privately held trees. And to the extent to which we have money available to do injections, we would certainly use it on those trees that make sense to inoculate. But with no guarantee of, a lasting impact of the pesticide, eventually it's safe to assume that all ash trees in the city will be infected by EAB.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Scott, Rebecca, I appreciate your time here tonight and your information. We take everything into consideration. We're glad we're working on these things. So Rich, thank you also. Rich's got a finger up. I think he wants to address this.
I would just like to thank Rebecca for everything she has done for the city and wish her well on her journey into her next career move.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, she's done.
Wednesday.
When's your last day?
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, Wednesday. Yeah.
Well, thank
It's
you,
like, what a
Rebecca.
coincidence. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, Scott mentioned the hours she's put in. I mean, to walk in, everyone I'm sure here saw her driving around town, walking around town over the past 12 months to take an inventory of the type, the status, the size, the location. I mean, we've got lat and longitude on every single publicly owned tree in the city, and that's a lot. So the benefit that she's provided and that has been really substantial. Has been a great member of the team, and she'll be missed, but we wish her the very best.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7B, Community Center Golf Simulator. Mr. Roby, I'll let you introduce our staff again.
Sure. Rich Kuchera is still with us, Public Services Director, and Allison Watkins, our Recreation Manager. Just want to set the stage a little bit here. So this is an item that Council discussed a few meetings ago, the idea of putting a golf simulator set up in the community center in one of the racquetball courts. It's been requested to come back to Council. And before I let Allison and Rich take over, one of the main reasons I gather from Council's decision to table the item initially was the timeline of the rec facilities master plan and the development of that and work on that. And just to provide a little update on that, Rich, Allison, and Scott and I met with representatives from Bolton and Mank. So just to take it back a step further, earlier this year, the city sent out a request for proposal to several vendors, several consulting organizations who do and have done recreation facilities master planning in the past. We received one applicable proposal, and that was from Bolton and Mank. And so 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting with 3 members of the Bolton and Mank team. 4 of them, actually, 2 of them are Bolton and Mank employees, and 1 is a consulting firm. Bolton and Mank has worked with materially in the past on projects such as this and the Lonsdale Community Center study, Chaska Curling Center study. So done some local studies around recreation in the recent past. And the goal of that was really to discuss the proposal that had been asked of Bolton and Mank, to discuss their thoughts on it, set the stage for them as far as what our expectations were, what council's expectations were for this study, what the goals were, what some potential timelines could be. And ultimately what it boiled down to is we're looking for a picture to be painted of what recreation looks like from the community center standpoint, from a ball field standpoint for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So we, from a timeline standpoint, we laid out our expectations. We would ideally like something that we could at least start to discuss when it comes to 2023 budget. Will anything materially be ready by that point? It won't. There isn't enough time to do the due diligence, to get community feedback and things like that. But the goal will be to eventually build a survey that will be available to the broader community, to re-engage the community center task force, which had been initiated in 2021, to start looking at specifically the community center and what could be done to bring in more revenue, what needs to be done based upon the community's desires, things like that. So that task force will be re-engaged with this process. I would say probably within the next couple of months. We are at this point just waiting for Bolton and Mank to come back to us with a timeline and their recommendations for next steps. They've got a lot of really interesting ideas, and they've got a good team working on it. So we're really excited about it. But in the meantime, the reality is that the footprint that we have right now at the community center is likely to stay for the short term, the next 1 to 2 years. What we do within that structure, within that footprint, is dependent certainly on budget, but also on some other opportunities that may come up that council can decide to opt in or opt out of. And one of those things is this golf simulator, using the existing footprint of the community center in an underutilized area to generate revenue. And not only generate revenue, but ultimately provide a recreational option to the community that's not available. So I wanted to set that out before Rich and Allison discuss this. So unless there are any specific questions for me, I'll let them take over.
Thank you, Administrator Roby, Mayor, Council. Originally, some of you may remember pre-COVID days, that was a long time ago, Allison and I were tasked with this mission of determining the cost to operate these various service centers of the community center. That was the origination of what Joe was referencing. That's what the origination of bringing on the Sueur Community Center Task Force and now the Recreation Center Study. And that's what brought this thing all about. Now we're here to say, the community center, it's different than the rest of the city. It's a business. This is a recreation business. It's not like the water utility. It's not like the wastewater utility. It's not like the streets. This is a recreation business. We are trying to make a profit, not just bring in revenue. We're trying to make a profit so we're not dependent on the taxpayers to supplement the facility.
So with that, Mayor, council members, thank you for having us. So back in May, we did present this to you. The simulator hasn't changed. The 2Vision definitely is the best simulator out there. I actually did go to Woodbury and play it, and it's a phenomenal time to be had, whether you're new at golf or, you're a pro. But so this is what the simulator looks like. It has 24 different positions for course contour. So it's going to move with you. So if you hit on the course and your ball's up on a hill, but your feet are up, but the ball's lower, the simulator is actually going to do that. So you're going to get the real feel of actually playing on a golf course. It has high-speed sensors on the ceiling and at the tee, so it's very, very accurate. And I can say it was the best simulator I've ever played on for accuracy. It's got the automatic tee and ball retrieval. If you're a golfer, you've definitely had your ball come off the tee, and it is a pain in the butt. But this thing is really cool, does it for you. It's got multi-surfaces, so it's got rough, the sand feel when you're hitting the ball. It actually really does feel like a rough when you're hitting it out of there. It's not just, you're not just hitting off a plain turf surface. It's it feels like the rough or the sand. So it's definitely a cool simulator. It's got the kiosk with it, which is really user friendly. If you want to go to the next slide. So up to 6 people can play on it. It has over 200 courses. You can play with golfers around the world in tournaments. Not only that, but we would also as staff plan leagues, classes, lessons, also tournaments that we can play locally as well, not online with other golfers. But the cool thing about this is you're not paying per person like when you go to golf. So when I take my kids golfing, I'm not only paying for them, but I'm paying for myself. So it comes out to over $100 or something, to play 9 holes of golf. Now you can pay per hour. So for $50 for the non-prime time, I can get, 4 people with me, and I'm only paying $12.50 for this thing for the hour. And you can get a lot of holes in an hour, depending on how fast you play, if you're not socializing too much, but you get a lot of holes in, which is nice. So next slide. So this slide shows, so we've done some research on it. Like Rich said, we've done the legwork on trying to bring in new things that bring in money to the community center. This is definitely one thing that we believe could bring in a nice revenue stream for the community center without changing the aesthetics of the building itself. There are simulators around us in Mankato and New Prague. However, they don't have the latest technology, which the Golf Zone, the 2 version is. So their turf is just turf. They don't have the different like rough or sand turf aspects to go with it, and their platform doesn't move. So they're just, basically standing on that carpet floor hitting a golf ball. So ours would be different. So it's gonna bring a draw into the Sueur. And especially during the winter months, we're hoping. So we've also talked with the reps from Golf Zone. I know we brought this to you in May, but we've talked with them about timeline. Would we be able to get it in before the winter? And they believe they'd be able to get it installed by the end of September. So the cost hasn't changed, timeline hasn't changed. We would still be able to get this in before the non-traditional golfing season ends, or the traditional golfing season ends and winter comes, and then you either have to go to Florida or Arizona to play golf, or you don't get to play at all. So next slide. How this would be financed, basically it would either do an equipment certificate or a municipal lease for 3 years at the suggested rates, which Rich, if you want to flip over real quick on the slides. Highlighted in black is the non-prime time area, so $50 an hour. Remember, it's an hour, not per person. And then the red highlights prime time hours. So from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., you got your non-prime time hours. It's a little bit cheaper. Your prime time hours are going to be 5 to 9 p.m. and then the weekends. So during the ice season, when we have thousands of people in our building and they leave to go to the parking lot because their kids are practicing hockey and they don't want to sit in the ice arena, we can retain those people. We're retaining them to keep them in our building, paying money to do something fun, to do something in recreation, to keep them in our building, which is also going to bring us a nice revenue stream of profit to our facility.
So just as Allison said, so during the hockey season, we have 55 opportunities of prime time there. So out of those 55 times, if we just have roughly 50% or 28 times come in, that's 50% usage. That could bring us in $50,000 of profit a year. Profit, not revenue, that's profit after we make our annual payment on this thing. And that's over and above our 1-in-1 that we already talked about.
Mayor Kirby. Hey, Allison, have you done any checking? You said the one in Mankato, there's one in Mankato currently.
There's simulators out around our area, but they don't have, like I said, the latest technology. The closest one is Woodbury. Lakeville actually is putting in a facility that has 6 of them
Okay.
and a bar to go along. But
That's what I was gonna ask you about. I was curious if this was comparable to the one that's getting put in Mankato now. There's a 4 platform.
And it probably is. I mean, they may be doing obviously the latest technology if they're planning on one. I could not find that when I was researching everything.
Well,
I found Lakeville's.
It actually just went to council and was just looking it up on the
Okay.
11th, so.
Yep.
Must be becoming pretty popular.
They're
my
they're
hunch.
they're huge.
Yeah.
When I first brought it to Rich, I was actually in Michigan playing with my stepfather. And I've been playing on simulators for years, and these are definitely the coolest ones I've ever played on. I mean, you can play St. Andrews if you want, Pebble Beach. Like, I'm not going to Scotland to play golf. You know, I could actually see what it's like to play that course. It's really cool.
I got a question more so for our city administrator. We talked about our park and rec study earlier. What is, you said they shared a lot of exciting news with you. Did this news include a simulator or anything like this?
Oh, I would say, and I'll just maybe clarify what I said earlier. I would say they had some insights into, what a facility with our footprint could potentially do. And I think the general sense, and I'm not going to call it a recommendation from them. They didn't recommend one thing or another at that time. But given the timeline of when a study could be completed, what we might be able to do with our budget in the meantime, what a project timeline might look like, whether it's with the existing footprint or a different footprint of the building itself, was that from a staff standpoint, we see a 3-year term, a 3-year payback on this type of installation would not be unreasonable. We're not going to be moving those racquetball courts in the immediate future. Maybe eventually, but for the purposes of a 3-year equipment lease, it's time-wise reasonable.
And then how would you recommend that we market this when it's in that racquetball court, which has a foot by a foot window into it? I mean, nobody can see what's going on in there ever. I guess that's one of my biggest concerns. And the other concern is I know it just takes 1 or 2 players, a day to kind of pay for this, but my concern is May through September. There's just not a lot of traffic in there. That's a lot of golf that we got to make up in September through May.
Well, I definitely think with the potential of the hockey season and people not doing anything when their kids are practicing, like it will definitely generate some revenue in the wintertime. But May, I mean, last week was hot as can be. And I tell you what, I play golf and I hate playing in that heat. Like I just don't do it. So we're still going to get some revenue stream from the people playing in the summertime. There's also, stormy days, cold days. There's also a population that can't handle the heat and the humidity, but they still want to do something and be active and have something to do. This brings something new. Plus there's also, we can do lessons during the summertime. Instead of going to the course, we can do it in-house. We can do leagues at night during the summertime too. So you can't play in the dark. So there's different times that you can bring people in the summer. And there's definitely different ways that we can market it to get people excited about it too. So.
Who would give lessons?
Well, I'm definitely hoping right now we partner with the country club, Sueur Country Club. I'm hoping to talk with, I believe it's Adam, talk with him and see if we can get staff and do kind of like what we do right now with pay or fee. With
Well,
fees coming in.
yeah, he'd be the only one qualified to be able to give
Yep.
a lesson out there. And during the summer months,
Well,
probably 10 months out of the year, it would be hard pressed to get him there. How would you staff this?
Well, with the Keezy door control, not much staff has to go into it. We also have camera system that is going to be in place too. So if anything does happen to the system, because staff might not be there during that time, we will have it all recorded. But with the Keezy system,
But someone has to pay to get in there.
right, and with the Keezy system, we'll be able to, we'll be able to do it online, and then I can just send them the code.
And if something goes wrong with the simulator,
We do have staff here that does live in town, so they can come up. And I mean, same thing with the pool season. If the pump goes down, I call staff that live around here. It would take me an hour to get here, so.
when you play golf on a simulator, when you go to places, what other amenities are there?
I've played them in bars, basically. So other than drinking, not many other amenities. They are popping up at other golf courses. So during the winter, they have something to offer as well. So I've never been to an arcade that has a simulator.
That's my biggest concern, is there will be no other amenities for people to show up and golf there. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think there's going to be a line of golfers when their kids are at hockey practice. The percentage of golfers in town here is not very high. And I think to be able to attract someone from out of town without any amenities is a huge stretch.
Well, I think hockey is the amenity. That's why they're coming to the arena. I mean, they're here already. I go and sit when my kid played hockey and sat in the parking lot and watched Netflix.
And it might be interesting for you to find out how many of those hockey parents have any interest at all in golfing on a simulator.
Yeah, we can do that.
How many holes do you get in an hour?
I found if we're playing just two people, you can do over 18.
Okay.
If you're playing by yourself, definitely over 18. If you're playing with four, it becomes more of a social aspect.
Sure.
And some people take longer. So it's usually 18 or less.
Your membership, your community center membership will have no impact on the simulator as far as rate of pay?
As far as like the fitness facility, things like that?
No, I'm a member, Mark is not. We're both going to pay the same for the simulator.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's probably a question for Rich.
That'd be, to me, it would be a separate system,
Right.
And we did talk a little bit about that. Yeah, your community center membership is not for that, but you could buy a golf package membership. Yes.
Same thing with the arena when we do public
Yep.
skate. It's not part of their membership to the facility.
Yes.
That's separate.
Anybody else?
I get back to logistics about getting in the door if they're not a member.
That's
Yeah.
part of the access control
Yep.
system.
Okay, that's all that will be included.
So like your access card right now, I'll get you in every single door that you have to go through, the front door, the middle door, and then upstairs or whatever. You would have an access code on your phone that you
Okay.
could be sent, and it would do the same thing.
Okay. Kind of curious what to say to the people who want that pool back. They see you spending money on this, but they want the pool.
I'm also, go ahead.
No,
I was just gonna say, this is helping your cause. Honestly, if you look at it right now, we're doing nothing to bring more money into this building, and it's gonna stay that way until we finish our facility study, until we can grow and build something new. This is bringing a revenue profit stream into the facility that we don't have right now. I personally would love an $80,000 revenue stream instead of staying stagnant where I am right now, even though, you know, with the memberships and stuff like that.
So you see this simulator is an opportunity to gain revenue with having less numbers to attain that revenue, say, than if you had the pool functional, the amount of participation in the pool to make that profitable would be probably not sustainable for this community.
There is no pool that is ever profitable.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm all for this. Explain to us, we know they're gonna do the, remove one racquetball, to put this in. How much, there's not much of an impact of racquetball at all. Why don't you explain more, because the public wants to know probably, if we remove a racquetball, will that mean less people to play racquetball?
It'll mean less people to play volleyball.
Oh, that or volleyball?
Yeah.
Volleyball is definitely more used than racquetball. But the volleyball nets can be done on either court. So we're not losing the volleyball court. We're just switching it to the other one or the racquetball court. Either way you look at it. And I've never had an issue with conflict of people playing volleyball or racquetball at the same time. Honestly, in my 3 years here, it's never happened. So I think there's definitely enough time for those people that want to play either racquetball or volleyball, along with the simulator in the other room, which isn't going to hurt the aesthetics of the room at all. So you're not changing anything. It's a come in, install, build in the room itself, and maybe drill a couple of holes to put in the electrical stuff, and that's about it. So.
In building this time frame, how long does it take to build, to put in?
It's at about 3 weeks.
And how much of impact that to the people who are renters and members of the?
Definitely less than me waxing the floor.
No, good.
Yes.
No, there
Total.
shouldn't be much impact at all.
Anybody else? I will, I'm just gonna kind of close with, you know, my concerns just a month ago were, you know, as we walk into the community center, we've got a parking lot that looks like a battlefield. And to get to this simulator, you got to walk by an empty pool. So I understand, I applaud you two both for trying to think of ways to get people into the community center. I do. I think it's great that we're thinking out of the box. I'm just not so sure this is the golden ticket, but that is my 2 cents. So anybody else have anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain any motions to approve pursuing the purchase and installation of a, what's it called, golf zone 2 vision unit in a racquetball room at the community center.
Well, I make a motion to approve this golf simulator.
We've got a motion from Council Member Huntington. We have a second motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Sullivan has given us a second motion. Any other discussion, comments, concerns?
Just one comment. I'm not opposed to the idea of doing this, but I'd sooner we do everything all at one time. That's my only comment.
All right, well, with that said, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that 3 ayes?
Aye.
4 ayes? All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 3 nays, so the ayes have it, if my counting's correct. Okay.
Mhm.
And we have approved the simulator, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this as we move along. So good presentation, by the way.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7C, council goals. I think we're going to review these tonight for 2022, 2023. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, As most of you will recall from March of this year, City Council met at its annual work session, retreat, various names for it, to discuss the City Council's goals, both the goals for 2021 and 2022, and then to look at potential goals for 2022 and 2023. So just for a little history, I understand Councilmember Williams was not a member of council at the time, but every year the council meets, and this has been going on for several years now, to discuss what the council's goals will be overall, to provide staff with some direction for key focus areas in which to spend staff time, and also some goals for itself as a council, some areas to work on, some things to look at. Some things are broad strokes, some things are very, very specific. So at the March retreat, when council met, there were 12 goals that were looked at from the previous cycle. It was determined at that time with discussion with City Administrator Krugel that 8 of those goals had been met. 4 goals were considered in process and were proposed to be pushed forward into the next cycle for 2022-2023. And at that time, there were 6 goals that were proposed, some by members of council, some by City Administrator Krugel, to be added to the 4 continuing goals for 2022 and 2023. What would be typical in a typical year following the retreat, council would do a final review of those goals and then approve them at a following meeting. Typically, those goals would be set at an early retreat earlier in the year, say January, February timeframe, to be approved shortly thereafter. This retreat was held a little bit later in the year than normal, and promptly following that meeting, City Administrator Krugel left the city, and City Council had to fill a seat, hire a new administrator, and so we're circling back on the goals at this time, understandably later in the year. But should council like it, I can certainly touch base on where we are with the 4 goals that continue to be worked on, and we can look at the 6 newly proposed goals as well. So what staff is looking for tonight would be a final review of the proposed goals for City Council and a motion to adopt the same. So if I may, I'll just go into this really quickly here, or not so quickly, depending on questions. But this is an outline of what the 2021-2022 goals were. There were 12 in total. Again, those highlighted in yellow were those that were determined at the retreat to have been met. Those not highlighted yellow were those that were in process still. Now, taking those 4 goals that were not yet met at the beginning of this year and bringing them onto the next round, those are the goals you'll see 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Those highlighted in gray are the goals that were proposed in March. So those that are being proposed to carry over are evaluating the feasibility of acquiring electric service territory located within the City of LeSueur corporate limits. This is an item that's still being discussed. It's a current discussion point. Goal number 2, develop and execute a plan to plat and market shovel-ready business park lots on the EDA-owned land adjacent to Highway 169. This is an item that, in fact, the EDA just discussed at its meeting tonight. So that's considered in process. Goal number 3, develop a fundraising campaign for the park project priority list. Rich and I actually just discussed this morning briefly as we look at the Parks, Open Spaces, and Trails plan, or the POST plan. Some of this is going to be dependent upon potential grant funding for things like Legion Park, where the city continues to pursue outside dollars for some of these parks plans. And when grant dollars, when there's a delta that needs to be made up between the grant dollars and what the proposed cost is, the city will at that time work with the Recreation Parks and Trails RPAC committee to look at setting up a fundraising campaign for that. Goal number 4, coordinate a celebration event to commemorate the reopening of Main Street. And I'm happy to report we had a soft opening last November when the street was formally opened to traffic. Right now, Stacy Lawrence and city engineer Corey Beanfang and I are working on a grand reopening of South Main Street, hopefully to correspond with another event at Main Street. We're working out some details right now, but the contractor is putting some final touches on South Main Street, and I'm committed to not opening that thing until that contractor is absolutely done with everything that's supposed to be done down there. So Corey Beanfang is actively engaging with our contractor to ensure that those things get done as quickly as possible so we can have a formal grand reopening and allow the community to come in, look at where we came from, where we are, how we got there, and generate a lot of excitement around what it will finally look like. As for new goals, goal number 5 is proposed is explore establishing a 5-year environmental sustainability plan for city operations and areas I would consider of the city that areas that the city touches. This is not uncommon for municipalities, townships, counties to have a sustainability plan. And certainly given the energy market as of late, I think it's timely that we start exploring this. Goal number 6, evaluate the city's emergency action plan and provide an updated document to City Council for evaluation and consideration of adoption. I know I gave the city administrator update, I believe last month on this. The city staff engaged in an exercise, a tabletop drill around emergency response. This is an item that our emergency manager, Justin Nielsen, and I have spent time discussing in the last couple of months as I've come on board in this role. And he and I have penciled in a timeline for when we think some of this work can be complete. We have a lot of the pieces in place. We just need to do a lot of updating. But this is something that's very important to me to get back in front of council in the short term. A real action plan that the city can open up when the time calls for it. Goal 7, a comprehensive review and update of the City of Sueur personnel policy. Previous City Administrator Krugel and Stacy Lawrence and the other directors have been working on updating the city's personnel policy, which involves everything from HR to pay to behavior and discipline for quite some time. Stacy and I have a meeting this week actually to get me up to speed on where we are with this, where the updates have been made, what updates still need to be made. But the goal is to have this in front of council during this goal cycle as well. It's important to leadership, and I hope it's important to city council as well, that we have an up-to-date personnel policy that reflects today's working environment. Goal number 8, review and update city code related to water, wastewater, and electric utilities. There's just a lot of language in current city code regarding our enterprise funds that needs to be updated. A lot of these updates have been made in draft form, and we're waiting for some feedback from the city's attorney before we make our next move. Goal number 9, complete a recreation facilities master plan and create a 15-year recreation facilities financial plan. Given the discussions tonight, I don't think that needs any additional comment. Goal number 10, City Council review and approval of police department and fire department policies. Mr. Krugel and I had a lot of conversation around this in the months actually leading up to his departure, and the importance of City Council oversight of police and fire department policies. And this is not necessarily City Council oversight over and management of procedures, but at the end of the day, the police department and fire department are departments of and by the city. And therefore, it's important to me that City Council ultimately understand what's in those policies, how those departments are operating, and how they're conducting their business. Most of their policies are what I would call model policies or best practice policies. So for the police department, those come from the post board and police officers standards and training board. Model policies, recommendations for things like use of force policy, investigations, things like that. For the fire department, the same thing. A lot of model policies out there that we as departments, as the city, can adopt. And to my knowledge, the city council has not formally approved of these policies in the past, but Mr. Krugel and I both thought it was important that city council at least have eyes on these and be able to approve them, that our departments then can stand behind and city council can feel comfortable standing behind. So those are the goals as they've been proposed so far. I'll entertain any questions or comments.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, please.
I'm going to focus on 3 things, if I may. 2 that are not up there, 1 that is. Goal number 7 that you have up there with regard to the recreation plan. It strikes me that we're not going to complete it this year. We know that. Why don't we change that to be begin or initiate or words to that effect?
That's an excellent point, and I'm not opposed to that.
Okay. Now, forgive me, I happened to open my drawer because I wanted to compare. In my packet, goals after number 4.5 were missing. I read them online, but it wasn't printed for what it's worth. So I pulled out what we had back in March. Lo and behold, I found that there are 2 that we haven't put up here that I think we intended. The first one, do you have the old ones up there, Joe?
I do.
If you go back to the one with the yellow. The old one, number 1, was schedule and conduct a Future of the City Forum. I think our intent was to include that. My notes on this, what you gave us from not what we had before, indicate old 1, which would be the Future of the City Forum. That should have been included. Also, old 11, which has to do with relations with the school board, was left off. Old 11 read, partner with the Sueur Henderson School District to establish normal meetings with a set agenda, with set agendas to better align community goals and communications. To me, those 2 were supposed to be there. And somehow they got left off. And I apologize. I didn't catch it till I looked at what I had stashed away here, trying to be able to read it better because that's so small. So tell me what you want to do. But I would suggest we add back in the Future of the City Forum, and that we add in also what I'm going to call partnering with or relationship with the school district. They're so important.
I agree with that.
They're basically taking what was last year's, bringing old 1 and old 11 into this year's. If that makes any sense, old 1 and old 11.
Yes. So I would just comment real quick on both of those. So in my review of the notes from the March meeting, the Future of the City Forum having been completed in 2021, that's why it was removed from the next set of goals, because the Future of the City Forum had been completed. And that in effect, it's a goal of the Planning Commission to conduct that forum. And that's why it was left off of the proposed goals for the next cycle. If council wants to include that as another goal of
I understand it happened in 2022, but it hadn't happened for years because we hadn't done it. Maybe we should simply say begin planning for the 2023, because it is that important. We really need to keep that in front of us.
Yep.
Begin planning for. And that's tasked to the Planning Commission, but it's still part of our goals because ultimately it's our responsibility.
I think we understand what you're saying. No, we've achieved a couple of those goals. That's how they got overlooked. But well, I think you're right. We got to keep those in the forefront of what we're looking at. So, anybody else? Any other comments? If not, we're looking for a formal motion to solidify these goals and the new ones and recognize the ones we've achieved. Correct? So I'll entertain any motions.
Motion to approve with the additions that Newell made.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanberg.
Second.
Councilmember Schleter, thank you. Any other comments, concerns? Anything else to add? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to regular agenda item 7D, Giant Days 2022 support. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most everyone knows, the Giant Days, annual Giant Days celebration is just around the corner here, the first full weekend in August. And I recommended bringing this to council, mostly for council's awareness. There are a couple of proposed action items here. In the long history of the Giant Days celebration, and likely extending beyond that to Corn on the Curb Days, the city of Sueur provided a certain amount of in-kind donations to the Giant Days celebration, whether it's use of vehicles, equipment, staff time, to make the event safe and successful, which is the ultimate goal. And from us, as a city standpoint, we certainly, staff want it to be successful, want it to be safe. It's the single largest event that the city regularly, or that the community regularly hosts. The Giant Days Committee specifically has requested $1,250 to sponsor a specific event. Last year, the city donated $1,000 to sponsor the fireworks. The committee increased their ask this year, given the economy and the increased prices of putting on the events. And so they've asked for a slightly higher dollar amount this year than what was granted last year. Separately, staff met with the Giant Days Committee 2 weeks ago now to discuss what their requests were from what I would consider an in-kind donation standpoint. And this is everything from public works staff helping set up the park and the streets beforehand, putting out no parking signs, using some equipment, use of the outdoor pool for an event, things like that, to get a timeline for those items. What they've requested is really nothing new than what's been provided in the past, but given the fact that it is the request is effectively that the city donate the staff time and donate equipment for this large event. I thought it was important to bring it to City Council and let City Council know what's being requested, what staff's recommendation is on granting this. And it was a good meeting that we had with the committee, laying out what types of services potentially we could provide and what specifically they're requesting. So ultimately, what they are requesting is $1,250 to sponsor a specific event, which again, last year was $1,000 to put our name as a sponsor on the fireworks show. And then what we have estimated as between $8,000 and $9,000 in-kind support, mainly staff time, but also equipment rentals, a waiver of the Main Street banner fee, and use of space for the weekend. Staff, so I've broken it into two separate motions, thinking that council may want to consider them both separately. And I'll open it up to questions.
I have a real quick question, Mr. Sullivan, then you can follow up. The $1,250 sponsor, that's actual cash the city will help sponsor. That is a partial sponsor. That's not for all the fireworks.
That's correct. I believe that currently Dell's Construction and Bolton and Mank are sponsoring the fireworks.
Very good. Mr. Sullivan.
Joe, I just got a couple quick questions, and I apologize for the first one. I meant to call you and ask you about it ahead of time, but is this $8,800 including the part of our waste management contract that covers the garbages for 9 days as well?
Yes.
So that's
no, excuse me. That's separate from this $8,800. This is strictly staff time and equipment rental.
Would that not be an in-kind donation as well? Because essentially that's part of our city contract. I believe it was in the past ones. That's why I'm asking the question.
It technically would, yes, because part of our contract with waste management does include covering trash receptacles for the.
To be clear though, are we paying that or are the citizens paying it in the contract, just by how much we charge.
Technically, the citizens are paying it because it's effectively somewhat of a pass through to the citizens. Yes.
Thank you.
Through that utility.
And then my only other question relating to the 1250, does that stand within the public purpose expenditure or donations? So I know that's come up in the past. There's been a lot of conversations with the league about that, whether things like this meet public purpose expenditures.
So from everything I can determine, if it's that the $1,000 donation did fall within that, and that it's if it is for a specific, if the council considers it to advance the public purpose for this amount, that's reasonable. The reason I called it out separately, however, is from the in-kind donations, is because there were several years when the city did not for that very reason. And my recommendation would be to approve the in-kind donations, and I don't have a direct recommendation to approve the disbursement of funds specifically because of my concern over that.
Well, and I guess personally, and I feel like this came up a few years ago since I came on, and I feel like we had received direction from the city attorney at the time saying that that did not meet and that's why I was asking the question. I can't recall 100%, but I feel like that's where we ended up a few years back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something we want to reach out to Mike about and get an opinion from him. If that's, I mean, I'm all in favor of it. I don't want to seem like the guy that doesn't want to support a town festival, because I do, absolutely. I think it's great for our community. But I also think we need to run that fine line and make sure we're doing it legally as well.
I completely agree. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer from the city attorney on this as yet. I think it's also, dependent upon if it's considered, if the city wants to consider it, marketing dollars for the community, or, so we have some things where the community center itself will give a membership to the outdoor pool as a silent auction item, for example, as a marketing tool to draw in membership to the community center. Granted, that's for a different purpose than something like a direct sponsorship, but it does blur the line for a direct financial. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that the city had a specific budget item for donations, and there's a reason the city moved away from that.
It seems odd that if Bolton and Mink and Dell's Construction are sponsoring the fireworks, it seems like a small ask. It just doesn't make sense to me. The fireworks are $20,000. I mean, why are they asking us for $1,000?
Yeah, it just seems like the in-kind is a big impact versus this bit in the bucket, so to speak.
It is, and just to give you a little bit more history on the 1250, the letter that we received was, what I would call the standard letter that is sent out. If you give money once, you get the letter again that says if you'd like to sponsor an activity or a parade float. It was not specific to fireworks. Correct. It was.
Well, if it's legal, I'm fine with it. If it's not legal, I don't want to do it.
And I don't think we'll have that answer tonight, so.
Could we not make a motion that, again, Marvin, forgive me, my brain is not with me at the moment. Public use, what was the term? What was the public
purpose expenditures?
Public purpose, excuse me. We could pass a motion that if our city attorney tells us it meets the criteria for a public purpose, we approve it. If not, we do not. A little history for the council. Forgive me, I'm sort of the old guy around here. Marvin was with us too. I think Scott might have been. Mark, I'm not sure you were at the time. We went through a whole list of these requests from community groups, and we found out we weren't supposed to do it. okay? And we have to be very careful because it's our responsibility as stewards of the finances of the city to do it correctly and to follow the law. So I applaud Marvin for bringing this up. I think we can get an answer from our council, but we can make the motion subject to a clearance from him that this meets the public purpose, if we want to do it at all. We could separate the two if we want to also, but my comment's done. Thank you.
Which is why, to your point, Councilmember Krogman, I did want to separate these. Again, from a staff standpoint, I'm very comfortable recommending one, and I'm not comfortable recommending the other, partly because of the public purpose expenditure piece, but also partly because if I think in general, the city moved away from this overall because you have to handle it on a case-by-case basis. And frankly, if we need to call the attorney every time we're not exactly sure, that's an extra $150 to $200 that's tacked on to attorney's fees if we're not absolutely certain. And so it's easier just to say, no, we're not going to do it ever at any point from a donation standpoint.
Wouldn't the auditors kind of have could hypothetically give you, if you hypothetically ask them feedback?
Yes, hypothetically.
So am I reading this right? We have a motion from Councilmember Krogman to approve direct.
No,
you didn't.
just talking about a possibility.
I was going to say contingent. Okay, all right.
I actually have one more question, Joe. And I mean, moving forward, I believe when we got the memo the last time, it was under our previous city attorney. It might be worthwhile to get an opinion from our current city attorney on direction on donations as a whole.
Yep, and that's what I'm looking for.
I mean,
From
more
our
or
current
less,
city
not so
attorney.
much just for
Our city attorney.
this, but moving forward for these other donations that we make or potentially could be asked to make.
Agreed. Yes.
So at this time of the first request, approval of financial donation to Giant Days 2022 event. Right now, there's no motion.
I'd go ahead and make a motion for the 8,800 in-kind support.
That's the only motion we have then.
I'll
Mr. Sullivan,
second that.
been seconded by Mr. Schleter.
Okay, to be clear, Mr. Mayor, we're dealing with the second one.
Just the second
shown,
one
which is
only.
in kind.
Second one only. So with that said, motion's been made by Councilmember Sullivan, seconded by Councilmember Schleter. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. You gonna say something? Moving on to item 2. You want to say
Mr.
something?
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
I think we have to decide what we're going to do about the first request. It does say action requested, although I think our city administrator's been a little bit soft on that request, but I understand that, understand why, okay? I'll make a motion to bring it before us that we approve the $1,250 subject to our city attorney giving us a legal opinion that it meets the public purpose.
So that's a formal
That is the motion.
motion. Okay, very good. Councilmember Krogman has made the motion to approve the direct financial donation to Giant Days 2022 event of $1,250 contingent. It meets the criteria after it's been presented to our legal counsel.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Sullivan. Any other discussion, comments, concerns?
I do remember the discussion that Marvin was talking about before also, and I am not comfortable with it. I don't think we're gonna hear anything different than what we heard the last time. So I would rather we don't even pay for the attorney to look into it again, since we were told once before that it's.
Well, we've already got a motion. We've got it seconded that we go forward with this contingent. It
Let me
meets the criteria.
comment quickly on the attorney thing. This is a way to get clearance. We know what we're doing in the future. We kind of put it to rest.
And set a policy from that statement, which I don't know, I thought we had done. But,
Not to my
and I think
records
we
that I can
have to, I
find.
mean, I think we need to set that policy.
Okay, let's take to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I,
1, 2, 3, 4, 3 ayes or 3 nays? Am I correct? I'm an aye. Let's go down the line. Nay? No?
No,
No? Aye?
Aye.
no.
just
No.
to be,
We're motioning on
Doing the donation contingent, it meets the criteria of the legal counsel.
So it'll essentially get legal counsels, whether it is or it isn't. If it is, then we would make the $12.50 donation.
Okay. But I thought there was a motion about clarification to then adding on to a policy, so you don't go
That-
through this every time.
It's not part of the motion.
That's got to be a separate conversation.
It's good.
This is clarification and funding.
It'll give us direction in the future, whatever our legal counsel advises us of.
and I would add that I will take this discussion back and based upon, regardless of the result of the vote on this motion, city staff will pursue a policy on donations.
So
Not being partial to all this other stuff that's in the past, I would need clarification from you. So that's a hey.
you vote to move ahead? Okay, very good. So we have 4 yays and 3 nays to move ahead with the donation contingent. Our legal counsel says it meets the criteria to make it all legal.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I may, can I go back to the first one that deals with in-kind?
Mhm.
Notice how the motion is phrased. It's simply to approve in-kind. I suggest that the minutes reflect exactly what they were, so we have a record of this for the future. Not just we did in-kind, because this has been a historical issue, trying to determine how much support we're giving. Not that we don't want to, but we need to know what it costs the city.
Well,
So
and
those things should be listed in the minutes because the motion basically incorporated the memo, but that, the way it's phrased does not.
well, and I specifically noted 8,800 in the motion. When I said the motion, I
Understand?
didn't
I'm
read the
talking about
motion,
listing exactly what
And
they
that's-
were.
and that's fine.
Yeah, listing what's listed as what the items were or will be, should be in the minutes. That's a suggestion.
Noted. And that's, again, I think from an in-kind standpoint, I don't know to what extent council has in the past even looked at what was provided to this event. That's not to say the council shouldn't approve in-kind donations, but because it is a material amount of staff time and equipment that has been used in the past for this event, it's in my view appropriate that council be aware of the level to which they're comfortable sharing staff time and equipment with any celebration at all. So it would be my goal to bring this forward to city council every year with what the ask is when we have a preliminary meeting with the Giant Days Committee each year.
Very good. So with that said, review things real quick. We did pass the motion to give the donation of $12.50 with the contingencies, and also we're moving ahead with the request for the in-kind donation. Moving on. Item 7E, R 2022-030, La Sueur Henderson 2022 referendum. I had some discussion with our city administrator last week. We worked quite closely with the school district last month regarding the workshop we did with the school district. We also had the presentation given by the Vote Yes Committee, the advocacy committee for the Vote Yes at the last meeting. This is one of our goals, by the way, we just got done talking about is our relationship with the school district. This is an opportunity for us to galvanize our relationship with the school district. And with that said, I'll introduce our city administrator, Roby, to take us through the R 2022-030.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor represented a minute ago, the council's involvement in becoming aware of the referendum that's being proposed by the school district coming up on August 9th has some history. Council heard a presentation from Superintendent Jim Wagner at its June meeting, followed with a Q&A with school board members about what the referendum's about, why now, why the dollar amount, why these specific questions, so that council can become familiar with it and what it means for the community more broadly outside of the school district. Then the Vote Yes Committee was invited to hear some community members' stories about why they're supporting the referendum from a perspective that the district can't legally provide, and engaged in some discussion with members at that time. I'm also aware that community members have been discussing this with council members outside of the meetings here, as I imagine they would, as this has a lot of direct corollaries to city business and the future of the community more broadly, again, outside of the district. And I think I tried to address some of the questions that have been brought directly to me at our last meeting about what this referendum means for us as a city. Not only the day-to-day business of the city, but also long-term what this means from a comprehensive plan standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, from a health of our community standpoint, from a staff perspective, and looking at the long-term health of our overall community. In visiting with the mayor, we're suggesting or bringing forward a proposed resolution that provides formal support from the city for the referendum. And it effectively does just that. It lays out the reasons why, it discusses the relationship and the partnerships that we have with our district. And I do hope that, through the goals that were approved tonight, that we'll continue our partnership with the school district, which is, of course, not always a rubber stamp guarantee of support from the city council, but rather a healthy dialogue back and forth between the board of the district and the city council to try to align our long-term goals. And in places where they don't align, try to find common ground. So the resolution that's in front of council tonight would declare support for the proposed referendum by the city of Le Sueur, based upon the presentations that we've heard so far, based upon conversations we've had with the community members, based upon what staff recommendation is as well, through conversations that I've had with city leadership at a staff level. And I'll open it to questions and comments at this time.
I kind of shared some of my thoughts in the opening statements of this motion that we're going to look at here. If anybody else has anything to add, this is your opportunity. If not,
I have just a few.
Go ahead.
things, Mayor. I guess on this resolution, I'm putting my city council hat on it as far as the city goes, and I will be supporting it. But I also was a resident, and I have to think about that too. But as a city and working with a school district is a goal of ours, and I think it's very supportive. We support the school system.
thank you. Anybody else? If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt R 2022-030, declaring City of Le Sueur support for the LSH 2022 referendum.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I think Ms. Williams got the second in. So with that said, any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to our last agenda item is the carnival permit for Giant Days. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This would typically be a consent agenda item, and it has all the hallmarks of a consent agenda item. There's nothing extraordinary here. This was simply a matter of we did not have all the necessary information that we needed from our friends at the Giant Days Committee in order to get this on the consent agenda 2 days ahead of time. As of today, we had all the information necessary to complete the application and approve it at a staff level, hence the reason it's on the regular agenda. So this is for the carnival that Giant Days Committee would like to bring for the Giant Days event with games and rides. We have all the appropriate insurance documentation. that is required. They'll be holding this on what is primarily school district property to the north of the outdoor pool, as they have in previous years. And this is simply a request to approve their permit. Again, this would normally be on the consent agenda, but we didn't have all the information from the committee in time to put it on consent, so it's on regular.
Any other comments, concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the carnival permit for Giant Days event.
So moved.
Mr. Huntington, thank you.
Second.
Mr. Swanberg, thank you. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to comments, reports, items of appreciation. Council members, this is your opportunity. This is your platform to share with the public any events you might want to share. And at this time, as always, we will start with Mr. Huntington.
Thank you, sir. We last week had an MRV team meeting, and I'm going to refer that to our chairman, Marvin, when it's his turn. Secondly, I believe we have another meeting with the Giant Days Committee before Giant Celebration.
We do, yes,
Okay.
next week.
I've been asked by the Giant Days Committee
This week.
to get a handle on how many people are going to be on our float as far as the city council goes. So I suggest that if you were going to have me on the float, let Joe know, so he can tell the committee.
Did we have a float last year? I don't believe we
No.
did we?
We didn't, but this
We
year
did
we
not.
are.
There was, well, I took a little survey last year. There wasn't a lot of interest in it, but I mean, we can talk about this, so.
Oh, you want to talk about, that committee came to me and said they're going to have a float for us. They want to know how many people want to join it.
Admittedly, this did not
I
come up. as
suggest
a
that
topic
not
of
be a
conversation.
matter of discussion right now.
Well, that's what I'm going to say.
We'll take a survey off time here, so.
Okay.
Anything else? Moving on to Councilmember Krogman,
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Schleter.
I did attend an HRA meeting last Wednesday, and next week from the 27th through the 29th, I will be attending the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Summer Conference in Red Wing.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan.
As Councilmember Huntington said, we had a transit meeting last week. We got our audit presentation, everything came back fine. Did our operating grant for next year, nothing new there. And then the only other major thing is we did follow through with electric bus grant application. So that might be the way of the future for us.
Thank you. Councilmember Swanberg.
EDA met tonight before our council meeting. Work in progress on finding a new leader for the committee. They have 2 candidates that they will be interviewing shortly, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams.
I just would like to note, thank you to the streets departments for cutting down the bushes that interfered with the sidewalk when I take a walk. So I appreciate that. And then I also appreciate everybody doing this paperwork. That support staff that everybody takes this for granted is really nice to have. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's it.
Ending with myself, I have nothing to report tonight. I do have a hospital board social tomorrow night. We will be joined with the Waconia board and also the Arlington board. So looking forward to that. Mr. Roby, anything else you want to share?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. With that said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.